My name is Nathan Harper, and I used to think I knew my wife. That was before she sent me a text message that made me realize I'd been living with a stranger for 8 years. It was a Tuesday night in May, around 11:30, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Erin was still at another one of those company parties that seemed to happen every other week at her PR agency. I was half asleep, watching some old horror movie on cable, when I saw the notification light up my screen. My boss says I deserve better, so I'm leaving you. I stared at those words for a solid 30 seconds, my brain trying to process what I was reading. Then I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because it was so perfectly ridiculous that my wife of 8 years would break up with me via text message using her boss's opinion as justification. Derek Stiles. I knew exactly who she was talking about. 45 years old, silver hair, expensive suits, and the kind of confidence that comes from never being told no. He'd been circling Erin like a shark for months, always finding excuses to keep her late at the office, always complimenting her work a little too enthusiastically at company events. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake, and typed back, "Glad to hear it. So when your boss leaves his wife too, will she be free tonight?" The response was immediate. My phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. "What are you doing? Why would you say that? This is serious, Nathan. I'm trying to have an adult conversation." Adult conversation? Right, because texting your husband at midnight to dump him is the height of maturity. I turned off the TV and really looked at those messages. 8 years of marriage, and she was ending it with corporate speak about deserving better. But it was that phrase, "my boss says," that made everything click into place. Derek hadn't just been circling, he'd been hunting, and apparently he'd finally caught his prey. I typed back, "You know what, Erin? You're right. Your boss probably is better than me. How did you figure that out? Did you test drive the merchandise?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "I don't know what you're implying." "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking directly. Are you sleeping with Derek Stiles?" This time, the 3 dots took almost 5 minutes to turn into a response. "That's not what this is about." Which, of course, meant yes. I set my phone down and looked around our bedroom. Our bedroom. The king-size bed we'd picked out together 3 years ago. The dresser where she kept her jewelry in the little wooden box I'd bought her for our anniversary. The framed photo of us from our honeymoon in Hawaii, both of us grinning like idiots on the beach. When had it all become a lie? My phone buzzed again. "We need to talk when I get home." I picked up the phone and typed, "Actually, we don't, but I do want to talk to Sophie Stiles. You know, Derek's wife? Since you're so sure he's better than me, I figure he'll be leaving her soon, right? So she'll be available. What do you think she's like in bed?" The phone rang immediately. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again. Voicemail. By the 3rd call, I turned it off completely. I got up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet suburban street. Mrs. Patterson across the way still had her porch light on. The Johnsons' dog was barking at something in their backyard. Everything looked exactly the same as it had an hour ago, but somehow the entire world had shifted. 8 years. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 6 of them. We'd bought this house together, adopted a cat together, talked about having kids someday, and she was throwing it all away for her boss. But here's the thing about Derek Stiles. I'd met him plenty of times at company events, and I knew exactly what kind of man he was. The kind who collected trophies, beautiful things, expensive things, other men's wives, the kind who got bored once the chase was over. Erin was about to learn that lesson the hard way. I walked back to the bed and picked up my phone, turning it back on. 17 missed calls, 12 new text messages. I scrolled through them, watching my wife's panic unfold in real time. "Answer your phone. This isn't funny. I'm coming home right now. We need to talk about this like adults. Stop being childish." Childish. That was rich, coming from a woman who was having an affair with her married boss and dumping her husband via text message. I typed one final response. "Take your time coming home. I'll be here. But fair warning. I'm going to want details. Like, when did this start? Was it before or after the Christmas party? And does Derek's wife know yet? Because I'm thinking she should." Then I turned off the phone again and went downstairs to make coffee. It was going to be a long night. 3 weeks earlier, I'd gone to Erin's company spring party. I usually skipped these things. Standing around making small talk with people who worked in marketing and public relations wasn't exactly my idea of fun. But Erin had been insistent. "Please come," she'd said, adjusting her dress in the mirror. "Everyone always asks about you, and I'm tired of making excuses." So I'd put on my good suit and driven downtown to the fancy rooftop bar where Sterling Communications held their quarterly celebrations. The place was all glass and chrome, with a view of the city skyline and cocktails that cost more than I spent on lunch in a week. I'm an IT consultant, which means I fix other people's computer problems and try to explain why their simple requests would require rebuilding their entire network infrastructure. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well enough, and I get to work from home most days. Compared to the aggressive networking and constant schmoozing that Erin's job required, it suited me fine. The party was exactly what I'd expected. Lots of loud conversation, expensive alcohol, and people trying to impress each other with industry gossip and client stories. I found a spot near the bar and nursed a beer while Erin worked the room, introducing me to colleagues whose names I immediately forgot. That's when I first really noticed Derek Stiles in action. I'd seen him before, of course. He was hard to miss. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of presence that made other people automatically defer to him. But that night, I watched him watching my wife. He had a way of positioning himself so that he was always in Erin's line of sight. When she laughed at someone else's joke, he'd appear at her elbow with a comment that made her laugh harder. When she went to refresh her drink, he was somehow already at the bar, ready to order for her. "Your wife's really something special," he said when he approached me later in the evening. "You're a lucky man, Nathan." "I know," I replied, studying his face. "She's amazing at what she does." "Oh, she definitely is." The way he said it made my skin crawl. "I've been thinking about giving her more responsibility, maybe some travel opportunities. There's a conference in San Francisco next month that would be perfect for her." "Travel opportunities?" "Right." "That's generous of you," I said. "I'm sure she'd appreciate the chance to advance her career." Derek smiled, and there was something predatory about it. "I believe in investing in my best people. Erin has so much potential. She just needs someone who recognizes her worth." The implication was clear. I wasn't recognizing her worth. He was. I excused myself and went to find Erin, who was deep in conversation with two other women from the agency. As I approached, I caught the tail end of their discussion. "So talented, and Derek definitely notices," one of them was saying. "You're so lucky to have him as a mentor." "He's been incredibly supportive," Erin agreed. "He really believes in me." "I bet he does," the other woman said with a knowing look. "Derek's always had an eye for exceptional women." They all laughed, but there was an edge to it that I didn't like. These women knew something. They were watching Erin the way people watch a car accident about to happen. On the drive home, I asked Erin about Derek's travel suggestion. "Oh, that," she said, looking out the passenger window. "It's just a conference. Networking stuff. Sounds like a good opportunity." "Maybe. We'll see." But I could tell she was excited about it. There was an energy in her voice that I hadn't heard in months when she talked about work, or when she talked to me, for that matter. That night, I lay awake thinking about Derek Stiles and his investment in my wife's potential, about the way he'd looked at her and the way she'd responded to his attention, about those women at the party and their knowing looks. I told myself I was being paranoid. Erin wasn't the type to have an affair. She was practical, logical, committed. She'd never do something so destructive to our marriage. But over the next 3 weeks, things started to change. Erin worked later more often. She took more calls in the other room. She started dressing differently, more carefully, more expensively. She bought new perfume, and she started talking about Derek more. How brilliant he was, how much she was learning from him, how he really understood her professional goals in a way that other people didn't. Other people apparently included me. The night she sent that text message, I finally understood what I'd been watching for weeks. Derek Stiles hadn't just been mentoring my wife. He'd been seducing her, slowly, carefully, making her believe that she deserved more than what she had, making her believe that he was the one who could give it to her. And it had worked. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop and a pot of coffee, doing what I do best, gathering information. Derek Stiles was 45 years old, married to Sophie Stiles for 18 years, with 2 kids in high school. He lived in Westfield, in one of those sprawling suburban mansions with a circular driveway and a 3-car garage. His wife was on the board of the Children's Hospital and chaired at least 3 different charity committees. Sophie Stiles was beautiful in that polished, expensive way that rich women manage. Perfect blonde hair, perfect teeth, perfect clothes. In every photo I found online, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. She also looked like she'd never had an original thought in her life, but that might have been unfair. Rich people had their own problems. I dug deeper into Derek's background. Sterling Communications was his company. He'd built it from nothing over the past 15 years, and now it was one of the biggest PR firms in the city. He had a reputation for being ruthless in business and charming in person. He collected expensive cars, expensive art, and apparently expensive women. This wasn't his first affair. A little more digging through industry gossip sites and social media turned up hints of at least 2 previous relationships with employees. One woman had left the company abruptly 2 years ago. Another had been promoted to head their West Coast office, which was either a reward or a way to get her out of town. Derek Stiles had a pattern. And my wife was just the latest victim. Around 6 in the morning, I heard Erin's car in the driveway. I closed the laptop and waited. She came through the front door looking like she'd been crying. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and she was still wearing the same dress she'd had on for the company party. She stopped when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we? Because I thought you'd already said everything in your text message." She sat down across from me, and I could smell Derek's cologne on her clothes. Expensive stuff, the kind that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in a month. "This isn't how I wanted to tell you," she said. "How did you want to tell me? Skywriting? A singing telegram?" "Don't be sarcastic. This is hard enough." "Hard for who? You? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been having a pretty easy time of it." Erin's face flushed. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because I think you've been sleeping with your boss for weeks, maybe months. I think he's been telling you that you deserve better than your boring husband who fixes computers for a living. I think he's been promising you things. Promotions, travel, maybe even a future together. And I think you believed him." She stared at me, and I could see the truth in her eyes. "How long?" I asked. "Nathan, how long, Erin?" 2 months. Her voice was barely a whisper. 2 months. The timeline fit perfectly. The late nights had started in March. The new clothes, the new perfume, the distance between us. It all started 2 months ago. Was I right about the Christmas party? She looked confused. Earlier, I asked if it started before or after the Christmas party. "You've been thinking about this for longer than 2 months, haven't you?" He started paying attention to me around Christmas, yes, but nothing happened until March. Nothing physical, she meant. But the emotional affair, the seduction, the slow erosion of her commitment to our marriage, that had been going on for 5 months. "And you believe he's going to leave his wife for you?" "He says he's not happy with Sophie. He says they've been growing apart for years." I almost laughed. "Erin, do you hear yourself? You're reciting the cheating husband's greatest hits. My wife doesn't understand me. We're growing apart. You're different from her. This is the oldest playbook in the world." "It's not like that. Derek isn't like that." "Derek is exactly like that." "Do you want to know how I know?" "Because I spent the night researching him. This isn't his first affair with an employee. There was a woman named Jennifer Walsh who left the company 2 years ago under mysterious circumstances. And before that, there was Sarah Chen, who got transferred to Los Angeles right after Derek hired a new assistant." Erin's face went pale. "You're lying." "Am I? Call Jennifer Walsh. She's working for a nonprofit now, making half what she made at Sterling. Ask her about Derek's promises." "I don't believe you." But I could tell that she did, at least partially. The doubt was there in her eyes, fighting with whatever fantasy Derek had sold her. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, standing up. "You're going to pack a bag and go stay with your sister for a while. I need time to think, and you need time to figure out if Derek Stiles is really worth throwing away 8 years of marriage." "Nathan, please, can't we work this out?" "Work what out? You've been cheating on me for 2 months. You sent me a text message breaking up with me because your boss told you that you deserve better. What exactly is there to work out?" She started crying then, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She looked young and lost and confused, like she'd woken up from a dream and couldn't figure out where she was. But then I remembered the smell of his cologne on her clothes, and the pity disappeared. "Pack a bag, Erin. I'll call you in a few days when I've decided what I want to do." She went upstairs, and I heard her moving around in the bedroom, opening drawers and closets. 20 minutes later, she came back down with a suitcase and her work bag. "I'm sorry," she said from the doorway. "I know you are. The question is whether you're sorry you did it or sorry you got caught." She didn't have an answer for that. After she left, I sat back down at the kitchen table and opened my laptop again. I had work to do. The next few days passed in a strange kind of limbo. I went through the motions of normal life, working on client projects, grocery shopping, paying bills, but underneath it all, I was conducting my own private investigation. I started with Erin's computer. She'd left it behind in her rush to pack. and while I felt guilty about violating her privacy, I felt more curious about what I might find. Her email was password protected, but I'd set up her laptop originally, and she'd never been great about security. What I found was worse than I'd expected. The affair had started exactly the way I'd guessed. Derek had begun with compliments about her work, then moved on to personal conversations about her goals and ambitions. By January, he was suggesting private dinners to discuss her career development. By February, he was telling her that she was too talented to be held back by people who didn't appreciate her potential. The messages were masterfully manipulative. Derek never directly criticized me, but he painted a picture of Erin as an exceptional woman who was being wasted on ordinary things. He talked about trips they could take together, projects they could work on, the life she could have if she was brave enough to reach for it. And Erin had eaten it up. Her responses showed a woman who was starving for recognition and validation. She wrote about feeling unappreciated, about wanting more from life, about wondering if she was settling for less than she deserved. Derek fed those insecurities expertly, positioning himself as the solution to all her problems. The physical affair had started on March 15th, after a client dinner that had run late. Derek had suggested they get a nightcap to celebrate closing a big deal. One thing had led to another, and they'd ended up in a hotel room downtown. Erin's email to her sister the next morning was painful to read. I did something terrible last night, but I can't bring myself to regret it. For the first time in years, I felt alive. After that, the affair had escalated quickly. Hotel meetings twice a week, long lunches that stretched into the afternoon, weekend work sessions that were obviously anything but work. Derek had been promising her a promotion, a raise, and eventually a future together once he figured out how to handle the situation with his wife. The most recent emails were the worst. Derek had been pressuring Erin to leave me, telling her that she couldn't have the life she deserved while she was still tied down by her marriage. He'd convinced her that I was holding her back, that I didn't understand her ambitions, that she owed it to herself to choose happiness. You deserve better, he'd written just 3 days ago. Don't let fear keep you from the life you're meant to have. And Erin had believed him. I printed out the most damning emails and put them in a folder. Then I started working on phase 2 of my investigation. Derek's social media profiles were carefully curated, but social media always tells a story if you know how to read it. His Facebook page was full of family photos and business updates, but the comments told a different story. Too many women leaving flirty messages, too many late-night posts from bars and restaurants that weren't near his home. His Instagram was worse. Lots of photos from business trips, expensive dinners, and company events. But in the background of several recent photos, I could spot Erin. A hand reaching for a wine glass here, a reflection in a window there, a shadow that looked suspiciously like her profile. Derek wasn't being as careful as he thought he was. I also started following his wife's social media. Sophie Stiles posted constantly, charity events, shopping trips, lunches with friends, family vacations. But there was something desperate about it, like she was trying to convince the world, and maybe herself, that her life was perfect. Her most recent posts were telling. Lots of solo activities, lots of time spent with friends instead of her husband, lots of vague comments about focusing on myself and new beginnings. Either Sophie was planning to leave Derek, or she already knew about his affairs and was preparing for the inevitable. On Thursday, I decided to take a more direct approach. I drove to Sterling Communications during lunch hour and waited in the parking garage. I didn't have to wait long. At 12:30, Derek's silver BMW pulled out of his reserved spot, followed closely by Erin's Honda. They drove separately to the Marriott downtown, parked in different areas of the garage, and entered the hotel through different doors. Amateur hour. I waited an hour, then called the hotel and asked to be connected to Derek Stiles' room. When he answered, I hung up. But I'd gotten what I needed, confirmation that he was registered there, and his room number. That evening, I called my friend Mike, who worked in hotel security. I need a favor, I told him, and it's probably not entirely legal. What kind of favor? I explained the situation, and Mike was quiet for a long moment. You sure you want to go down this road? He asked finally. Sometimes it's better not to know. I already know. Now I need proof. Give me the details. 2 days later, Mike called me back. Your wife and her boss have been meeting at that hotel every Tuesday and Thursday for the past 6 weeks. Always the same room, always pays in cash, always checks out after 2 hours. And Nathan? The room is registered under his name every time. The guy's not even trying to hide it. Thanks, Mike. I owe you one. Just be careful what you do with this information. Revenge has a way of backfiring. But I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I was planning justice. On Saturday morning, Erin called. "Can we meet somewhere and talk?" she asked. "I've been thinking about what you said, and I want to explain some things." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop near her sister's house. I arrived early and chose a table in the back corner, away from other customers. When Erin walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed, she wasn't wearing makeup, and she had dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't been sleeping. The confident, polished woman who'd walked out of our house a week ago had been replaced by someone who looked lost and fragile. "You look awful," I said as she sat down. "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." "I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just observing that whatever you thought you were getting from Derek doesn't seem to be working out." She ordered a coffee and stared at her hands. "He's been distant since I left you. He says he needs time to figure out how to handle his situation at home." "His situation at home? You mean his wife and kids?" "It's complicated." "No, it's not. He's a married man who is having an affair with his employee. Now that you've actually left your husband, he's realizing that this got more serious than he intended." Erin looked up at me, and I could see the doubt in her eyes. "He loves me." "Does he?" "Because according to my research, Derek Stiles has a pattern of having affairs with his employees. You're not the first, Erin, and you probably won't be the last." "What research?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the information I'd compiled. Jennifer Walsh, who'd left Sterling Communications under mysterious circumstances. Sarah Chen, who'd been transferred to Los Angeles right after Derek hired a new assistant. The pattern of behavior that stretched back years. "This is circumstantial," she said, but her voice was shaking. "Is it? Call Jennifer Walsh. Her number is in the file I sent to your email this morning." "You sent me a file?" "Check your email." Erin pulled out her phone and opened her email app. I watched her face as she scrolled through the documents I'd compiled. The timeline of Derek's previous affairs, the information about his other victims, the pattern of promises and abandonment that defined his relationships with employees. "This doesn't prove anything about Derek and me," she said, but she was crying now. "No, it doesn't. But it proves that you're not special to him. You're just the latest in a long line of women who believed his promises." "You don't understand. What we have is different." "Is it? When's the last time you heard from him?" "Yesterday." "What did he say?" She was quiet for a long moment. "He said he needed some space to think about our next steps." "Space to think, right. And how long is this thinking process supposed to take?" "I don't know, a few weeks maybe." "A few weeks? And what are you supposed to do during these few weeks?" "Wait for him to figure things out." I leaned back in my chair and studied my wife. 8 years of marriage, and she'd thrown it all away for a man who was now asking her to wait while he decided whether she was worth the trouble. "Erin, do you hear yourself? You left your husband for this man, and now he's asking you to wait in limbo while he decides what to do with you. Does that sound like love to you?" "It's complicated." "It's not complicated. It's simple. Derek Stiles is a predator who seduces his employees for sport. He told you what you wanted to hear, made you believe you were special, and convinced you to blow up your life for him. And now that you've actually done it, he's realizing that he never intended to follow through on his promises." Erin was sobbing now, and part of me wanted to comfort her. But a bigger part of me was angry. Angry that she'd been so naive, angry that she'd destroyed our marriage for a fantasy, angry that she was still defending the man who'd manipulated her. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to call Derek right now and tell him that you've made a mistake. I want you to quit your job and find somewhere else to work. And I want you to come home and spend the next year proving to me that our marriage is worth saving." "I can't do that." "Why not?" "Because what if you're wrong? What if Derek really does love me?" And there it was. Even faced with evidence of his pattern of behavior, even after he'd started pulling away from her, she was still choosing him over me. "Then you've made your choice," I said, standing up. "But when this falls apart, and it will fall apart, don't expect me to be waiting for you." I left her sitting in the coffee shop and drove home. When I got there, I called a lawyer. It was time to move on to phase 2. The lawyer's name was Patricia Morris, and she specialized in divorce cases involving infidelity. She was a small, fierce woman in her 50s who had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting her clients' interests. "How much evidence do you have?" she asked after I'd explained the situation. I handed her the folder I'd compiled. Emails, hotel records, witness statements, timeline documentation, and financial records showing money spent on gifts and hotel rooms. She flipped through the documents, nodding approvingly. "This is very thorough. In a no-fault divorce state, this won't affect the legal proceedings much, but it might be useful for other purposes." "What other purposes?" Well, if your wife's boss is using company resources to conduct an affair with an employee, that could be grounds for a sexual harassment lawsuit. It could also be relevant if his wife decides to divorce him. His wife doesn't know yet. Are you planning to tell her? I'd been thinking about that question for days. Sophie Stiles seemed like a nice woman who didn't deserve to be cheated on, but I also wasn't sure I wanted to be the one to blow up her life. I'm considering it. If you do decide to tell her, make sure you have copies of everything, and be prepared for the possibility that she might not believe you or that she might already know and have chosen to ignore it. Patricia walked me through the divorce process, explaining how assets would be divided and what I could expect in terms of timeline and costs. It was all very civilized and businesslike, but underneath the legal language was the end of my marriage. One more thing, she said as I was leaving. Be very careful about any revenge fantasies you might be having. I know this is an emotional time, but don't do anything that could hurt your case or get you in legal trouble. I'm not planning to do anything illegal. Good. But remember, the best revenge is living well. Focus on your future, not on punishing them. I thanked her and left, but I wasn't ready to take the high road just yet. That evening, I sat down at my computer and composed an email to Sophie Stiles. I'd found her contact information through her charity work. She was surprisingly accessible for the wife of a prominent businessman. Dear Mrs. Stiles, I wrote, my name is Nathan Harper, and I'm married to one of your husband's employees, Erin Harper. I'm writing to inform you that your husband and my wife have been having an affair for the past 2 months. I have documentation of their relationship, including hotel records and email correspondence. I thought you should know. If you'd like to see the evidence, please let me know how you'd prefer to receive it. I stared at the email for an hour before sending it. Once I hit send, there would be no going back. Sophie Stiles would know the truth about her husband, and Derek's carefully constructed life would start to unravel. I sent the email. The response came back within 2 hours. Mr. Harper, thank you for your email. I would very much like to see the evidence you mentioned. Can you meet me tomorrow for lunch? I'll send you the details separately. And Mr. Harper? I'm sorry this happened to both of us. The next day, I met Sophie Stiles at an upscale restaurant downtown. She was even more beautiful in person than in her photos, but there was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there in the pictures. How long have you known? I asked after we'd ordered. I suspected for months, but I wasn't sure it was your wife specifically until about 2 weeks ago. Derek's been having affairs for years. I usually just wait for them to burn out. Usually. This one feels different. He's been more careless, more obvious. And based on your email, it sounds like your wife actually left you for him. She did? Sophie nodded grimly. That changes things. Derek's other affairs were just physical. If he's making emotional promises to your wife, then he's escalating. I handed her the folder of evidence, and she flipped through it methodically, her expression growing colder with each page. This is very thorough, she said finally. You must work in technology. IT consulting. Perfect. Derek always underestimates technical people. He thinks if you're not in sales or marketing, you must not be very smart. What are you going to do with this? Sophie smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. I'm going to destroy him, professionally, financially, and socially. Derek built his life on his reputation, and I'm going to tear that reputation apart piece by piece. What about Erin? What about her? She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. Over the next hour, Sophie outlined her plan. She was going to file for divorce and demand a forensic accounting of Derek's business expenses, which would expose all the money he'd spent on his affairs. She was going to withdraw her support from his business networking efforts, which would cost him several major clients. And she was going to make sure that everyone in their social circle knew exactly why their marriage was ending. The thing about Derek, she explained, is that his success depends on people trusting him. He sells himself as a family man, a pillar of the community, someone you can count on. When people find out he's been systematically cheating on his wife with his employees, that reputation disappears. And Erin? Your wife will find out very quickly that Derek's promises were worthless. When his life starts falling apart, he's not going to have time for romantic fantasies. He'll be too busy trying to save his business and his relationship with his children. I left that lunch feeling like I'd just witnessed a masterclass in strategic revenge. Sophie Stiles had been planning this for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. My wife's affair had just given her the perfect opportunity. 3 days later, Derek's world started to collapse. The first sign that Sophie's plan was working came on Thursday morning when Derek called me. We need to talk, he said without preamble. Do we? This has gone far enough. You're destroying innocent people. Innocent people? Like your wife or like me? Sophie is filing for divorce. She's demanding a forensic audit of my business. She's telling everyone we know that I'm a serial cheater. This is insane. Sounds like she's telling the truth. How is that insane? You don't understand. This will ruin me. My business, my reputation, everything I've worked for. Maybe you should have thought about that before you seduced my wife. There was a long pause. Look, Nathan, I know you're angry, but Erin and I, what we have is real. I love her. Do you? Because according to Erin, you've been asking her to wait while you figure out how to handle your situation at home. That doesn't sound like love. That sounds like you're trying to figure out how to minimize the damage to your life. It's complicated. Everyone keeps saying that. But it's not complicated. You're a married man who had an affair with his employee. Now your wife found out, and you're facing consequences. The only complicated part is that you never expected to get caught. What do you want? Money? I can pay you. I almost laughed. You think this is about money? Then what? What will it take to make this stop? Nothing, because I didn't start this. You did when you decided to seduce my wife. Sophie started it when she decided to stop tolerating your affairs. The only person who can make this stop is you, by accepting responsibility for what you've done. And Erin? What happens to her in all this? That's not my problem anymore. She made her choice. Derek hung up, and I went back to work. But the calls kept coming. First, it was Erin, crying and begging me to call off Sophie. Apparently, Derek had told her that I was orchestrating some kind of revenge campaign against him, and that she was going to be collateral damage. He says he might lose his business, she sobbed. If that happens, he won't be able to leave Sophie. We won't have a future together. Erin, do you hear yourself? The man you left your husband for is now telling you that he can't be with you because his wife found out about your affair. And somehow, this is my fault? You told his wife. I told her the truth. What she decided to do with that information was her choice. But you knew what would happen. I knew she deserved to know that her husband was cheating on her, just like I deserved to know that my wife was cheating on me. The second call was from Derek's business partner, a man named James Rodriguez, who I'd never met. Mr. Harper, I understand you're going through a difficult time, but Derek's personal problems are affecting our entire company. We have employees who depend on their jobs, clients who depend on our services. Can't you find a way to resolve this privately? Mr. Rodriguez, I haven't done anything except tell Derek's wife that her husband was having an affair. If that's affecting your business, then the problem isn't with me. The problem is with Derek. But surely you understand that destroying Derek's reputation will have consequences for innocent people. Like it had consequences for me when Derek seduced my wife? James Rodriguez didn't have an answer for that. The third call was the most interesting. It came from Jennifer Walsh, the former Sterling Communications employee who'd left the company 2 years ago. Mr. Harper, I heard about what's happening with Derek Stiles. I wanted to thank you. Thank me? For exposing him. Derek destroyed my career and my marriage. I was never able to prove what he did to me, but now that there's a pattern documented, I might be able to get some justice. What did he do to you? The same thing he did to your wife. Seduced me, made me promises, convinced me to leave my husband, but when I actually did it, he panicked and fired me, said I was becoming too emotionally attached and it was affecting my work performance. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be proud. Derek Stiles has been ruining women's lives for years, and you're the first person who's managed to hold him accountable. After that conversation, I started to understand the real scope of Derek's behavior. This wasn't just about my marriage. It was about a pattern of predatory behavior that had been going on for years, with Derek using his position of power to manipulate and exploit his female employees. By Friday, the local business journal had picked up the story. The headline read, Sterling Communications CEO faces divorce, harassment allegations. The article was carefully worded to avoid legal issues, but it painted a clear picture of a man whose personal behavior was affecting his professional reputation. Derek's biggest client, a national retail chain, announced that they were reviewing their relationship with Sterling Communications. 2 other major clients issued similar statements. On Saturday, Derek called me one final time. Are you satisfied now? He asked. His voice was different, defeated, exhausted. This isn't about satisfaction. This is about consequences. My kids won't talk to me. My business is falling apart. Sophie is taking everything. Maybe you should have thought about your kids before you started having affairs. Maybe you should have thought about your business before you started using it as your personal dating service. What about Erin? She's innocent in all this. Erin is a grown woman who made her own choices. She chose to have an affair with a married man. She chose to leave her husband based on promises from someone she barely knew. She chose to believe that you were going to leave your wife and children for her. Those were her choices. So that's it? You're just going to let her life be destroyed too? I'm not destroying anyone's life. I'm just refusing to pretend that actions don't have consequences. Derek hung up, and I never heard from him again. 6 months later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office, signing the final divorce papers. "How do you feel?" Patricia asked as I handed back the pen. "Relieved, mostly. Maybe a little sad." "That's normal. Even when a marriage ends badly, there's still grief for what you thought you had." Derek lost everything. His firm collapsed, his money bled out in legal fallout, and even Erin wasn't worth the effort once his life started burning. When Patricia asked if I had regrets, I said no. Exposing him wasn't revenge, it was protection, and Erin still had to own her choices. The win didn't feel triumphant, just quiet, like refusing to be a victim. Later, Sophie called to thank me and said her kids were doing better, Derek couldn't hurt anyone else, and Erin was trying to rebuild in therapy. I went back to work, still cautious about trust, but steady, hurt, not broken, and realized the real difference was simple. When it mattered, I chose integrity, and Derek didn't.